Hello everyone, welcome back to the latest lecture session. In the last couple of sessions, we moved on to discussing aspects related to air pollution, and I believe we were looking at, some of the ambient air quality standards and so on and so forth. Let's just have a quick recap of what we say the aspects related to air pollution. Let's take a holistic view and then move on to aspects like air quality index and so on and so forth. So let's get right into it. So here is a picture from this book, right? Environmental Engineering Fundamentals, Sustainability and Design, right? And that's something that you can refer to if you have some issues related to this class. Okay, so let's move on. Let's look at it from the holistic view, right? Obviously, what are we concerned about? We are concerned about emissions from urban areas, let's say, which will include carbon dioxide, volatile organic compounds, SOx and NOx, chlorofluorocarbons and particulate matter, right. So, you can have aerosol depending upon the size, you can have aerosol growth and then deposition or leading to regional haze, let us say, right. Or from the agricultural activities, we will also have volatile organic compounds and NH2 that is going to be released into the atmosphere. So, local effects, let us say, regional effects, let us say. What are the global effects? Let us say carbon dioxide, chlorofluorocarbons and such, they will undergo different reactions in the presence of sunlight, right. So, you have photochemical reaction cycles and transport, and what will that lead to? I guess ozone depletion. We are talking about the global scale here now, global warming, right, with respect to carbon dioxide, and obviously long range transport and relevant issues. And again, you are going to have relevant photochemical reactions, and that are going to again affect your what do we say, population out there. So, again, global issues, skin cancer, air quality is going to be pretty poor, and relevant locations and also locations nearby. And we have issues with respect to severe or extreme weather conditions, right. These extreme, the frequency of these extreme weather conditions is going to decrease, and we looked at the effect on species, right, species extinction. Regional, I guess we already looked at that, but again I as a concerned but primarily selfish citizen, what am I concerned about? Myself. So, I am obviously going to be concerned about death and asthma or the quality of life. Property damage, obviously, because the maintenance is going to be relatively higher. That is what you see when the weather conditions are very poor and even air quality is poor, let us say. And obviously, visibility reduction now. Let us move on. So, we are going to look at air quality index, as I believe we discussed in the previous session. I want to understand, let us say, without going into the petty details, I want to get you an idea about the air quality, let us say, in my locality or in the place I am thinking of moving to, right. If I have a choice to move to, let us say, two locations, one aspect is obviously the monetary aspect, but we are obviously concerned about long term health and the environment, right. So, I want to understand what is the air quality index out there. But first, again, as a selfish Indian, do I need to be concerned about the air quality? I mean, we know that typically the very young are at risk. Why is that? Because their bodies are not yet fully developed, and also they have a faster breathing rate, and so more air volume per body weight compared to the adults, let us say. The old are also at risk, again, it is human body, right, it is deteriorating with age, right. So, it is more susceptible. So, you will always have long term issues from exposure to air pollution, but people at old age, they obviously can't what do we say, sustain their bodies in such an environment, right. So, pollution can exacerbate these existing conditions. Again, the existing conditions could also have been caused obviously due to exposure due to air pollutants, or could have been caused due to lifestyle diseases. And obviously, persons with chronic illnesses, they are obviously going to face issues, or they face what do we say, face episodic asthma attacks, right. But again, why am I concerned? Let us say a healthy guy is more or less, right, and I typically do not care about most of the other people out there. Well, it is because though I might be healthy now, and let us say with my lifestyle or your lifestyle, let us say you want to live to 80 in a healthy manner, let us say. But what is happening, you are always continuously, breathing this polluted air. Think of it as a car engine, let us say, and that always takes in polluted air, and Again, you have an air filter there, right, with respect to both the engine and also with respect to the cabin. But with respect to humans, well, I guess we can put on masks and such, we can stop some particulate matter or some compounds, but most of the what do we say gases or particulate matter of lesser size are going through my body, right, are getting into my body. So over time, they will have their own adverse effects, and they will start chipping away at your what do we say health, and typically you will have issues by the time you reach, let's say 60, 70 or 80. And again, so I guess it is not just the relatively susceptible population that is going to be affected, it is everyone that is going to be affected. And I guess here we have a generic point of view, but I already conveyed what I wanted to. So in the previous set of slides, I believe I was looking at individual what is that compounds of concern or the different criteria pollutants individually. But rather than that, in today's session I want to have a overview so that we understand the relevant issues and how they are interrelated. So here pollutants, particulate matter, obviously both of 2.5 and PM10 microns, right. So we have fuel combustion, yes, how are we releasing particulate matter into the atmosphere? One is obviously due via fuel combustion, industrial process and agriculture. And in India, though, this is a great issue, unpaved roads, let us say, or road dust. Road dust is a huge issue in India, let us say. So that leads to considerable increase in particulate matter in Indian context, and also obviously construction, because we typically are a developing country and there is a great construction boom going on, and so we always have these effects. Obviously, what are the short term effects? I guess it can aggravate lung diseases, heart or lung diseases, and leading to respiratory symptoms, and obviously thus relevant issues with respect to hospital admissions, losing money, so on and so forth. And obviously, if you have a severe attack, you can we are going to experience premature mortality. Long term, this is what most of us are concerned about, can lead to the development of heart or lung disease, and obviously long term premature mortality, right. So and others, I guess. So here one aspect is primary particles primary particles are generated directly from a source, right, but secondary particles are formed from reactions in the atmosphere. So that is something to keep in mind. It is not what is happening right at our level, but due to transport you are going to have relevant issues at a global level too, mostly due to these secondary particles, let us say. Carbon monoxide, again mostly from fuel combustion from vehicles, or also I guess we talked about it in the Indian context, we have a lot of solid waste being burned, or we have leaves and such being burnt, and you have carbon monoxide being given out. And why is it? Typically from incomplete combustion of fuels and from due to insufficient amount of air for the required for the amount of fuel, let us say. So again, poorly maintained equipment, airflow limitations and such. I guess we already discussed these aspects, let us say. And one aspect is that we discussed what is this carbon monoxide affecting the ability of the body to carry oxygen, right, and it obviously can have heart diseases and such. But another issue is that at the local level, when you are let us say at a traffic junction and such, let us say, you can even have asphyxia. Again it is obviously related to this particular aspect, but severe episodes obviously can leave you struggling for life, let us say, or breath. So then we are going to move on to the other criteria pollutant, which is NOx, which is NO and NO2 together, we refer to them as NOx. And again here we have high temperature burning, let us say fuel combustion, industrial boilers, right. It is because air is rich in nitrogen, and that is how at high temperatures you end up forming NOx, and also some fuels can have nitrogen content, and also you can have formation of NOx. Again typically lung diseases, right, and relevant issues, let us say, and also respiratory infection. So this is something we already discussed, because air is mostly nitrogen, and during combustion of fuels, high temperature and sometimes pressure can lead to formation of the oxidized forms of nitrogen, which I guess are an NOx, I guess, right, NOx. So, but another issue is that NOx will lead to formation of ground level ozone, as in ozone in the atmosphere, right, is going to act as a barrier and it will prevent ultraviolet radiation from reaching us, right. Again, we are obviously breaching the ozone layer too, but we are creating ozone, the possibly one of the strongest, not possibly, one of the strongest oxidants out there, right. We are creating that at the ground level and we are continuously breathing that. And the NOx, which is again given out from both your vehicles too and also from your industrial boilers or such, it will lead to formation of ozone in the presence of volatile organic compounds and sunlight, let us say, right. Again, obviously NO2, nitric acid is an issue, formation of acid rain or leading to acid rain, and obviously historic buildings and such. I believe we looked at Taj Mahal as an issue. Then sulfur dioxide, obviously oxidized form of sulfur, sulfur present in fossil fuels typically. So, that is why fuel combustion, right, and this is one other aspect, natural sources such as volcanoes too. So, asthma and respiratory symptoms. So, I guess general aspects and then acid rain and historical structures, we already looked at that in that context. So, ozone, as we see, there are typically no ground level sources of ozone, that is why it is the only criteria pollutant that has no direct sources. It is a secondary pollutant formed by, as we discussed earlier, VOCs reacting with NOx in the presence of sunlight, let us say. So, that is something to keep in mind. And again, respiratory function, asthma and such, we already looked at it, but another aspect, I guess I have the pictures for this later on, is that it will damage sensitive plants and again obviously reducing the crop yield. Again, the poor farmer bears the brunt of most of urban activity again, right. Again, it leads to formation, this cocktail of VOCs, NOx, particulate matter, ozone will obviously lead to smog also or causing haze in the atmosphere. Lead, how is that coming into play here? So, waste, and as I mentioned, battery manufacturing, not just battery manufacturing, even dismantling of batteries or disposal of batteries, which is a huge issue in India. I believe we looked at one aspect in or nearby Ramganga too, where I believe we were looking at dismantling of e-waste. So, combustion in leaded gasoline and engineered aircraft, smelters or metal refineries and so on and so forth. And other aspect is the leaded gasoline, which is I believe relatively banned in India now, and paints are still used in many parts of the world, especially in Africa and some parts of Asia, I guess in some cases in India too, but to my knowledge not really. But as you see, it has a global footprint, it is almost tenth of the global environment risk is from lead. So, that is the footprint that we have. Why is that? Obviously, as we see, unlike the earlier cases, this will also directly, not also, this will directly affect the nervous system and IQ loss. Typically, the children, they can never reach their full potential, let us say, because they are still growing and they are now going to experience stunted growth with respect to their brain, if I may say so, right. And obviously, the usual cardiovascular effect, and also here we see renal effects, let us say, right, and early effects related to anemia. Okay, so again here I wanted to look at the bigger picture, not bigger picture, discuss all the aspects in one go rather than speak about them piecemeal, right. Particulate matter, carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxide, sulfur dioxide, ozone and lead. So, as you see, most of the aspects or the issues here is that once you let the pollutant out into the atmosphere, there is little that you can do, right. There is little, very little that you can do. So, in this context, obviously one aspect is that you have to treat it or attenuate the issue at the source. That is what I wanted to point out in this case. Typically it goes hand in hand with legislation, enforcement and awareness, at least awareness, that is what we are trying to bring about here, right. Let us move on and look at what we have out here. Okay, now we are going to talk about air quality index. So, earlier too we had, I believe, some air quality indices and such. Now again they modified it to make it more slightly more relevant. There are different methods, but again the issue is that you are going to choose those criteria pollutants we discussed earlier. I think we talked about 6 or so criteria pollutants, right, and then you are going to give some weightage to these pollutants, and then you are going to look at, let's say, the actual concentration on the ground at that particular point in time, right. So, you are going to have it to be a function of these indices and also concentration, right. And so, for each one you will come up with an air quality index for, let's say, ozone, one for particulate matter, one for lead, and so on and so forth. And the maximum, what do we say, value among all this will be the air quality index for that particular location. Anyway, let us go through what we have here. So, we now have a new set of Indian National Air Quality Standards, right, for 12 parameters. Again, all the 12 are listed here, but what is out of the 12, 4 have only annual standards, and these are the, I guess, most of the 8 are what we already discussed earlier, which I referred to as the criteria pollutants: sulfur dioxide, NOx, I am surprised we just have NO2 here, particulate matter, ozone, carbon monoxide, lead, and I guess ammonia here, I guess, right. Okay, so, we have averaging time and per hour, and also the standard. Typically, these have only annual standards, but rarely have I seen them coming into the picture, right. Those that are relatively more sensitive, we look at them even over the short term, carbon monoxide and ozone, right. So, that gives you an idea about how potent they are, let us say, right. So, let me look at what else I have. Okay, Indian National Air Quality Standards, the link is given here, both with respect to CPCB and the India Environment Portal. This is a good site to find information. Typically, CPCB site, I did not see that to be well or relatively well maintained. That is something for you to keep in mind. So, in Indian Air Quality Index, right here, please note that different countries have different ways of calculating air quality index. As I mentioned, you give different weightages to different pollutants, and also more importantly, each country or each method will decide, let us say, at which concentration of the pollutant, let us say particulate matter, will I feel that it is very unhealthy or healthy, I mean not very unhealthy and healthy, very unhealthy, unhealthy, satisfactory, and so on. So, different thresholds. So, I would say the new Indian Air Quality Index moved the goalpost by a bit, but not a lot. But again, keep in mind that you can't use our air quality index and try to understand the air quality index of other countries, because it is slightly, if I may say so, subjective. So, here we have, if the air quality index is between different ranges, we have different categories, so that the layman can understand the quality of the air out there, right. So, online monitoring network is up and running. Again, this is the link, we will look at that. So, obviously, as I mentioned, it is online monitoring network, and the issue, as I mentioned, is that each particular what is this now, online monitoring station for with respect to air pollution or air pollutants for these 8 or 6, I guess, criteria pollutants is pretty costly. I believe it costs around 1.5 to 2 crores, right. That is one hurdle, but please do know that unless we know what is out there and in what concentrations, we can never understand what is happening, and you can't really cut down on the source. For example, I can prioritize, once I know the situation, I can prioritize. I can see, okay, where do I allocate my resources, where do I need to look at enforcement with greater, what do we say, strictness, if I may say so, right. That was a poor choice of words there. Okay, let us look at this air quality index for a second. This is what we have. When we click on that link, we end up here. So, what do we have here? Okay, Anand Vihar is selected, and looks like today's date is September 16th, as we can see out here, and that is what you have out here. So, obviously, it is online and relatively real time. So, it is 2 p.m. the data updated at 2 p.m. and currently it is 2:30 p.m. on September 16th right here. So, what do we have here? Anand Vihar, where is that? I believe that somewhere in Delhi, I guess. Is this Anand Vihar? Okay, let me just try to look at that in greater detail. Okay, so that is Gangaram Hospital. Okay, we will come back to this. So, Anand Vihar, what do we have out here? We have particulate matter, and within this time frame from 4 p.m. Tuesday to 12 p.m. Wednesday, I guess, right, within this 20-hour period, average and minimum and maximum 2, I guess. And you see that for particulate matter 2.5, 10, NO2, NH3, SO2, CO and ozone, right. These are the aspects that they were considering as we just discussed. So, I mean from this they say that prominent pollutant here is PM10 because that seems to be contributing to the worst, what do we say, or to the air quality index, because that is the worst of all out there. So, the air quality index that they have is 168, and at 168 what was it? Was it supposed to be moderate? Okay, at 168 we see that it is moderate air quality right now. Please do know that the time is 2 p.m. when I guess it is relatively more sunny. This will come into play later on, fine. Okay, so what else do we have out here? Okay, I would just like to zoom this in, and now I would like to zoom it out, I guess. So, as you see, Delhi relatively better coverage with respect to the number of monitoring stations. So, if I move towards Roorkee, what do I see? Obviously, relatively lesser, and as we see or look at the bigger picture, you get an idea now. Where are most of the monitoring stations located? Obviously, not obviously, relatively more in Delhi, where I guess there is obviously a lot of I mean the population density is higher, people are relatively more informed, it is the national capital, so on and so forth, right. And thus obviously Delhi has a relatively lot of monitoring stations. But if you look at it, Roorkee, the nearest one is in Yamunanagar or Muzaffarnagar, right, and Dehradun, the capital of Uttarakhand, does not even have one. But okay, let us say if you think that it is sort of greater issue, so think of or look at Punjab and Haryana out here. The reason I say is, in the news or in general, people we see that, okay, Haryana and Punjab. So, in the whole of Punjab, how many do we have? Is it 1, 2, 3, 4, or at least it is certainly in single digits, right. That is something that I wanted to point out. And even in Haryana, the area that is outside NCR, you have very few, what do we say, monitoring stations. So, the issue is, let us say if I want to understand the system, or even the layman wants to know what is happening and such, you have relatively little data that you can rely on. Obviously, there are models, you can look at source apportionment and so on and so forth, right. But again, please do note that these obviously are models. Obviously, data at the end of the day is something that is much more worthwhile, right. So, that is something that I want to point out. So, let us look at what do we say, Uttarakhand once and see or look at, okay, we do not even have Uttarakhand here, is it? Okay, let us choose Uttar Pradesh, and what do we have? The nearest one here is, let us say, Muzaffarnagar. Okay, so we chose Muzaffarnagar, which was or is relatively closer to Roorkee, and New Mandi, Muzaffarnagar, and what do we see? Air quality index, I guess, is relatively moderate, right. But again, during the morning or in the morning, for some reason PM 2.5 seems to have spiked. Is this due to what do we say, road dust and such? We are not really sure though. Let us look at Yamunanagar, it should be relatively better. Do we have Yamunanagar out here? Okay, we do not have that. What about Greater Noida? Let us say Greater Noida Knowledge Park 4, right. Again here I guess similar trend, peaking somewhere in the early morning, but in Yamunanagar, or pardon me, in Noida we will not have such issues. Let me look at one other place of relative interest to me. Do we have any stations out there? Okay, so as you see in Andhra Pradesh, South India, it is pretty good. Again Tirupati, but again as you know, it is a huge or considerable place of considerable religious importance, though the traffic, foot traffic there is less, but still the air quality as you see is pretty good. Let us look at Visakhapatnam once, and again even here, because it is along the coast, you see that it is relatively better. And let us move on to another aspect, Tamil Nadu or city aspect. So, let us look at relatively more what do we say, populated area. The bus depot in Chennai, even here you see that the air quality index is pretty good. Again PM 2.5 is the issue, but PM 10 maybe they are not monitoring it, but the other aspects are pretty much within what do we say, well within the limits, and the quality of air there is pretty good, right. So, that is something to keep in mind. We will look at air quality index in relative detail, what do we see, in the next session. before I wrap up this session, I want to look at some of the aspects, in the news. Obviously, we want to understand what's happening out there. So, we will look at one aspect, as I mentioned before we wrap up. This is the case of wildfires. Again, wildfires as in natural fires too. This happens a lot in India, certainly Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, and so on and so forth. And it was happening a lot in Siberia, and we were really concerned about it because the size of the wildfires was greater than quite a few European countries, right. But now we are going to look at, let us say, the USA, right, and there are some aspects that I want you to understand. One aspect is, remarkable, what do we say, levels of dryness in California, never ever before seen temperatures. So, you have these forests, all this not fossil fuels, dry leaves and such, and you have, let us say, thunder or such, and then that triggers what do we say, wildfires. And to understand the scale of these fires, I just want you to look at one aspect. Okay, so here we can Guardian helps you visualize the scale of the fires. It is bigger than London, bigger than New York City. So, one aspect is that. Why are we looking at Guardian? Obviously, because it is free, everything else is behind a paywall, pardon me. So, right, so estimated area burned on the US West Coast is at least 4.7 million, 1 million is 10 power 6 acres, and this is just since August 15th, it has been just a month. So, obviously Guardian UK based, that is why they are looking at it. So, UK, or let me just type in Delhi here, let us see. So, here we are going to choose New Delhi, India to look at the scale, and I guess okay, it is slightly off out here, and hopefully now you can see this is the scale of, what do we say, the destruction that is being wreaked out there in the US along the west coast. So, it is bigger than New Delhi. Again, I guess the square is a bit off, but as you can see, it is bigger than New Delhi, Ghaziabad, Noida, Gurugram, all this area put together, you can understand it. I think we have another city out here, Bombay. So, again this gives you an idea about how it is, let us say, right. So, we have Bombay and the extent of devastation is clear. Again, why am I concerned about it? It is US, I am not really concerned about it, other than remarkable levels of carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere, people losing their homes and so on and so forth, right. This again gives you a reminder of what things are to come, let us say, right, or what the future portends. This is again wildfires USA, these are the latest pictures, and any of this picture will seem as if it is from a movie or such, but again these are all apocalyptic pictures, but again these should serve as, what do we say, warning to us, let us say, right. So, that is something to keep in mind. Here these were apocalyptic images, right. I mean, people try to stop them, but once these fires take the scale that they currently are at, nobody can not nobody, well, I guess you can prepare for it, but you can't really do much. Again, you can see the apocalyptic images again, California, Oregon, and so on and so forth, let us say, right. Again, you see different images, but I will leave you to look at that. But again, as I mentioned, I believe you can take some measures, but not a lot. And here I guess the natives and such who were living there since time immemorial, they had the knowledge. As in typically looks like they let some forest fires burn, let us say. Why was that necessary? Because then these forest fires, which were not very huge, but were still considerable, they would clear all this leaves and such that were on the ground, which would act as fuel for the bigger forest fires. While these smaller forest fires would only clear up these leaves while not destroying the huge trees that have grown up. But these bigger forest fires that we are concerned about, they are now wiping out everything in their path. Again, you looked at the scale of destruction earlier. But one aspect here is, again, the election is playing out there, and we have Mr. Trump, who is the president out here. I would just like to highlight a few aspects out here, right. Again, the reason we need to look at politics is, politicians decide what is going to happen, what to enforce, what not to enforce, and so on and so forth. So, they set the trend out there. So, if we say okay, politics, how does that really affect me? Not my cup of tea. That does not work, right? The roads we live in, let us say, or not live in, pardon me, use, let us say, the air we breathe, all these are typically tied up with the person who is obviously in charge of it. Again, we do elect them. So, let us see what is happening out there. Here we have this particular paragraph that I want to highlight. During his visit to California for a briefing on the wildfires and to bestow awards to California National Guard members who helped rescue campers stranded by one of the strongest of dozens of infernos, Trump also questioned the usefulness of US climate action. Please note that on November 4, 2020, the US is set to pull out from this, what is it now, International Climate Pact, let us say, right. I mean, Mr. Trump, the president, signed it earlier, but now I guess legally they will be moving out of it on November 4th, let us say. And again, why does he need to be, what do we say, concerned about it, and why do I need to be concerned about it? And now double quotes means these are his actual words. When you get into climate change, well, is India going to change its ways? Is China going to change its ways? Is Russia going to change its ways? No, it is not, he says, or rather it is rhetorically, it means that nobody is going to change their ways. And he says that we, as in the US, are just, we are just a small peck, meaning they do not contribute much to global warming or global pollution. They, meaning these countries, India, China and Russia, make up a big preponderance of the pollution. But as we know, looked at the data and such, that is not true. US has historically been, what do we say, contributing carbon dioxide at, what do we say, remarkable levels, and it is still one of the highest, if not the highest producer until very recently. So, what do we see, the Guardian comment? What do we have here? The Guardian comment. The US is in fact the biggest historical emitter of climate pollution, although China is currently the top emitter, let us say, right. And Trump interrupts somebody else and to say, it will start getting cooler, you just watch, meaning the climate will just, what do we say, start getting cooler. And here is the exchange that is shuddering, because we are all concerned with science meaning proven facts, or we are based on, we make our what do we say, decisions or take decisions based on reasonable analysis, or what do we say, knowledgeable analysis of facts. The whole thing is facts. But obviously now it is fake news and such out there. So, here the person responded, I wish science agreed with you. And the President of United States says, I do not think science knows. See, that is the issue that we have out here. And I guess, I thought I had another graphic, but let me leave that out there. So, that is what we have, some of the biggest polluters out there, current biggest polluters, historic polluters, again they are not really, what is it now, doing much, and they do not seem to have the political will to do much, because the kind of, what do we say, information that is propagating among the relevant countries, maybe even India too, I guess, is that it does not really matter much to me. And anyway, even if I do something, the other countries are not going to do much, so I might as well not do anything. So, again, these are all populist measures, as in you can win votes and be maybe remarkably powerful in the sense that I guess you can what do we say, reach some office or gain a lot of money. But in the long term, let us say, we never remember who is the richest person or powerful person, let us say 500 years ago. We are human beings, and we are concerned about the future generations. So, again, gentlemen, awareness is the issue, and people, what do we say, raising their voice. So, I guess with that I want to end my session, but as I mentioned, or rather promised earlier, we are now going to look at The Anarchy, the book by William Dalrymple. As I mentioned, this author came to my notice because the former US President Obama gave the book, one of his books, The Last King, to his general in Afghanistan. Again, that was a good book, you can read that, but again, The Anarchy, again, it deals with that period 1700 or 18th century and early 19th century, when I guess India, one of the biggest producers and what do we say, wealthiest nations in the world, let us say, was I guess subjugated by a trading company. Keep in mind that it is not the sovereign British country that, what do we say, subjugated India. It was the East India Trading Company, Why I say, or why I am discussing this, obviously one aspect is to get you, what do we say, get you to move out of your phones or tablets, let's say, and pick up books, because they provide information which I guess the videos and such typically cannot. And another aspect is obviously to let you draw analogies between the past and the future, because there are great analogies out here. So I'll just take 2 minutes and we will wrap this up. So I guess the setting was, I believe I mentioned 1500, but looks like the setting is 1599, when a few people came together and they started this concept of putting money to buy shares. That was the first time, I believe, maybe at least one of the first instances. So right now you have the stock market. Let's say you like a particular company, you think it will grow well, you are going to invest in it, you are going to buy the shares. Similarly there too, but earlier I guess the concept was that different tradesmen, carpenters came together and worked. But here I can earn profit without actually being part of that particular company. Now again, enough of that. Shakespeare was active at this time. So initially, why were these Britishers so eager to start trade or form this East India Trading Company? Well, Spain and Portugal were the biggest or richest countries out there, and they were colonizing, I guess, South America and so on and so forth. All the gold from there was coming to Spain and Portugal. England was lagging behind, and obviously we are always concerned with the person sitting beside us and how we are doing, right? Again, that's how it worked out. And Holland, I guess, which recently or at that time recently gained independence, was also much ahead of Britain in this context. But again, what are they looking at? They are looking at getting spices from the Mediterranean, let's say, or the Middle East, let's say. But where were the people in the Middle East getting the spices from? From the Spice Island, Mauritius, and Southeast Asia, including some from India, let's say. So initially they tried to get this particular trade going, but others were well established, so they had to stop that particular practice. And then what happened again, but people are answerable, they need money, they need to earn money because they took people's money. So what did they do? They decided to bypass this and go to the most lucrative option out there in the world, which was India. So they come here and try to set up a trading post in India. But for that, obviously they need to get permission from the preeminent emperor out there, which was, I guess, Jahangir at that time, right? Again, this ambassador from the UK goes there, but Jahangir, who is, I guess, the emperor of 20% of the world's population, which was contributing 25% of the manufactured goods to the world economy, let's say 25%. Please note that. At that time, UK had 5% population and 3% contribution. Again, obviously fortunes ebb and flow, that's something to keep in mind. Jahangir wasn't very interested because obviously he had other issues on mind, and this was a petty aspect, but finally he gave them some leeway, and then they set up shop in Surat, I guess. So I guess that's the opening act of our story, and with this I will end my session and we'll continue discussing relevant aspects in the next session. Thank you.